Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. This is Jason, host of Fighting Words Financial. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about Xpeng and what's been going on in our Patreon group. Making a video today on an article that I wrote to my Patreon group last week. I told them I'd wait a week or so to publish a video on this, so they had time to do whatever they wanted to do in terms of Xpeng stock. But let me outline for you what I think is going on with Xpeng for the next year or so. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know then that I've been on the Xpeng bandwagon since the very beginning. I hold a significant amount of shares. My average cost of acquisition is in the high 20s. I want to say it's right around $28 a share across my different accounts, but I'm not actually sure, to be honest. So what I'm saying is I'm a holder of this stock. I'm a long-term investor, and I'm going to be describing some of the challenges that Xpeng is going to have over the next year, why that may have a seriously negative effect on their stock price, but I am not planning to dispose of my shares in this time period. I will be adding more shares. In terms of a long-term investment, the only real concern I have with Xpeng at this point is the ever-present threat of delisting. I still hope that at some point that gets resolved through negotiations between our governments, but right now there isn't a ton of progress on that front. But things could change in the future. So setting that concern aside, virtually everything else in terms of Xpeng to me looks really, really good. So what I'm basically saying is that, and I'm going to be referring to my notes a little bit here as we go along, but what I'm basically saying here is that if you are thinking about adding to your Xpeng position right now, because the stock has been performing really well, especially in comparison to its peers in China, I think you might want to wait just a bit. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to add shares again, I think, in the low 30s in the next year or so. Now, like I said, Xpeng is a long-term investment for me, and my opinions on how fractured the Chinese domestic market is not really shared by the majority of YouTubers that are covering the electric revolution. So I think that the eventual limits for the market for Xpeng in terms of that Chinese domestic market, unless there's some significant consolidation, I think that the limit is roughly 1.7 million units, meaning in the future they'll probably be selling about 1.7 million cars. Let's adjust that upwards for population growth or purchasing power growth among the Chinese population, because they are becoming wealthier and wealthier as our economy expands and the middle class is growing to encompass more and more people. So in order to justify the sky-high valuation that Xpeng currently enjoys, they're going to require an international market for their vehicles. Now, they've already started that. They've already exported a few vehicles to Norway. Apparently, those are not selling that well at this point, and NIO is actually selling quite a few more vehicles, but they just got started. And if we look ahead at what they're looking to produce here in the near future with the announced G9 vehicle, that is a vehicle that is specifically produced for the international market, and it's a mid-sized SUV that's coming out here pretty soon. So, and they're looking to start producing that sometime at the beginning of next year. And that's going to happen a little bit sooner. And then there is a third factory that is going to go online in Q2 or Q3 of 2023. Total production capacity after those two additional factories go online is going to be about 400,000, which leaves some room for Xpeng to grow into that capacity before needing to go back to the markets with a secondary offering to raise cash, meaning they're going to go back to the markets, offer shares in the market, and raise cash. There's also a rumor of another project in the works in Chengdu, but that rumor has been floating around for months without any confirmation. But I would expect in the next year that we are going to see some additional secondary offerings, a little bit of dilution as they raise cash for that next stage of scaling up their production. However, due to some really, really bad timing, we are actually going to see a production stall for Xpeng, which I think is going to cause the share price to fall. Now, I think this is temporary. I'm a long-term investor. I'm not planning to sell out and then repurchase at a lower amount. I'm planning to dollar cost average over the next couple of months and add more in my position. Now, I do hold more NIO shares right now, but that is really just because I bought a ton of NIO at a low price. I would love to hold more Xpeng shares. My wealth, however, is not unlimited. So I'm going to take this opportunity over the next 9 to 12 months where we're probably going to see a little bit of price volatility for Xpeng to add to my position, right? So Three things are happening pretty soon that are going to negatively affect the share price. Number one, January deliveries are probably still going to look pretty good, barring any supply chain snafus. I'm really hoping that those supply chain woes don't bite Xpeng in the rear for January deliveries. But Chinese New Year is the last week of January and the beginning of February. Delivery numbers are likely going to nosedive, as that is typically a time in the Chinese market where we don't see a lot of auto sales, and traditionally we see a decline in deliveries and production. Chinese folks go home for this holiday. This is going to create some ignorance-driven panic to a degree. Now, the reason that happens, it has a lot to do with how the Chinese labor force was constructed over the years, and certain aspects with land ownership and restrictions on travel and employment. But let's say that is all in the past right now, but that still has some echoes here today, where we see people leaving by the tens of millions, leaving the large cities, going out to the countryside where they came from originally years ago to visit family and to celebrate. So March delivery numbers are probably going to rebound from February. We'll see a decline in February. We'll see a little bit of a rebound in March, but they're probably going to not look too much better than January delivery numbers, which might put further pressure on the share price. So I think that in February, when the delivery numbers come out at the beginning of March, we'll probably see a little bit of decline in price because people don't really know about Chinese New Year. In March, when we see that the numbers bounce back, but they don't quite look as good as January, or maybe they just look marginally better than January, we'll probably see some more pressure on the price here. But let's talk about a couple of other things that are happening right now. The contract with Hyma Motors to produce the G3 expires in Q1 of 2022. Xpeng is either going to have to shift that production line to a new facility, which is not very likely, renew the contract with Hyma, or discontinue the G3 model, which is produced in that factory. Now, the G3 model is not one of their best-selling models. If I were a betting man, I would say that Xpeng at least is going to try to extend that production contract, maybe by a year, or think about ending that production contract and discontinuing that G3 model. The G3 model is a pretty low volume model for Xpeng, and I think they're going to shift focus to that G9 as rapidly as possible to get it to the market. We may actually see the G3 model discontinued by the end of 2022. Number four, we're entering a stretch, and this is the most important thing, guys. Number four, we're entering a stretch of at least 10 months where Xpeng simply doesn't have any more capacity. And by that, I mean that they don't have the manufacturing space to make more cars. They have hit their limit based on the amount of factories they have online right now. Maybe they can add another shift, like a third shift at their factories or something like that, because I know they're not running on 3 shifts right now. But you don't get a sort of automatic 33% bump in production when you do that. That's a well-known principle of manufacturing. Just because you add, another 8 hours in your day doesn't mean you get another 33% production. There's always going to be issues with efficiency in that third shift. Now you have less time to repair things that break down, and it affects that first or second shift. So yeah, it's not a one-to-one addition here. And based on past manufacturing experiences, at best you're going to get another 20% out of that third shift in some of the most optimistic scenarios. So Xpeng's theoretical limit of production with their current operating facilities, this is a theoretical limit. It's about 240,000 units with a third shift, and that's going to be annualized fairly rapidly here when you look at where their production already is. The limit of their production is essentially roughly about 20,000 units per month until the end of 2022, or when they get that third factory online and up and running. And even then, it's going to take a while to ramp production. In December of 2021, Xpeng delivered 16,000 units, which is fantastic. It is my opinion that Xpeng is going to hit that theoretical limit of 20,000 deliveries by April or May, and from that period on, at least until the end of the year, we're only going to see incremental, if any, growth at all until that Guangzhou factory comes online. By that time, they will probably have already announced 1 or 2 more additional factory projects, but I'm not sure this is going to be enough to keep the share price supported. I think there's going to be a perception that sales are not growing, that rivals are catching up, rivals like NIO, Hosan, Great Wall, Geely, Li Auto, BYD, etc. I think BYD is actually pretty far ahead of Xpeng at this point. So I think there's going to be a number of great opportunities to buy the dip this year for Xpeng, as many investors are not going to understand and are not going to be prepared for the ramp up and capital raises, this whole sort of blueprint that Tesla laid out for Xpeng. So there it is, folks. That's my outline for Xpeng for the next year. I talked about this last week in my Patreon group, so they got a little bit of a preview. That link is in the description if you want to check it out. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you like this kind of content, and I'll see you next time.